Hey guys, so today we're going to start our next unit, and our next unit is not always everyone's favorite, but it is a necessity and something that's really important for us to be able to do, and that's we're going to be working with percentages. So percents are the one thing that I always tell kids really are the most real world thing that we learn, because in your future life, you are going to be using percents in a variety of ways. Anytime you go to the store, of course, if you get a percentage off, you're going to want to know how much you're actually going to pay for an object. That is a real world application. Anytime that you get a bank account and you want to open up a savings account, or you want to invest any money in the future, you want that money to grow. Banks will give you an interest rate, which will help your money grow. That is usually a percent. Anytime you take out a loan, so if you ever want to buy a car or buy a house or borrow any money from the bank for a variety of things in your adult life, you are going to have to pay interest on that loan. Credit cards are another example where you'll have to pay interest on the money that you borrow. So those are all percentages as well. So even though they're not always our favorite thing to work with in our life, they are very important, and it's very important for you as you grow up to be good at working with percents. So the first thing we're going to do in our unit, what you're going to be doing today, is you're going to actually be working with ratios, fractions, and percents. Before we can get into all the good stuff we're going to learn about percentages, we need to be able to convert ratios and fractions and percents. So that's what we're going to be working on for the first couple of days of our unit. Today at home, we're going to start by just reviewing what those three things are, and you're just going to practice converting between those three things. All right, so the first thing we have is some vocab. All right, the first thing you need to know is a ratio, and we've been working with ratios all year in a variety of ways. We worked with ratios in our similar figures unit to find the corresponding sides and angles of similar figures. We worked with ratios in unit rates to set up and solve proportions. So you should remember that a ratio is a comparison of two quantities. Anytime we're comparing two things together, we can write it as a ratio. Now, it's important to know that a ratio is a part-to-part comparison. That means we're comparing one part of something to another part of something. So, for example, I can write the ratio of boys to girls in this class is 12 to 15. Since it's boys to girls, the number of boys goes first, 12 boys. The number of girls goes second, 15 girls. You can simplify ratios just like you simplify fractions. So I can simplify the ratio of boys to girls in this class is 12 to 15. I can divide 12 and 15 by 3, and I would get or 4 to 5. So that means for every 4 boys in the class, there are 5 girls. Now, you can write ratios in 3 different ways, as we've discussed all year. You can write them in words, 12 to 15. You can write them with a colon in the middle, 12 colon 15. Or most of the time, just like in our previous units, we're going to write them in fraction form. Now, when I say in fraction form, it's important that you understand that it is not really a fraction. It is still one part over another part. So, for example, 12 out of 15 means 12 boys, 15 girls. It doesn't mean there's 15 total kids in the class. It means there are 12 boys and 15 girls. And again, I can simplify that to 4 to 5, which would be 4 over 5, means for every 4 boys, there are 5 girls. So those are ratios. Fractions are next, and I know that no one really likes fractions, but fractions are really an important part of math, because compared to a ratio, which is part to part, a fraction compares a part to the whole. So when we are talking about fractions of the class, we are talking about the total number of students in the class. So as I said before, there were 12 boys and 15 girls. 12 plus 15 is 27. So there are 27 total students in the class. So if I wanted to write the fraction of girls in the class, I would write 15 out of 27 students in the class are girls. If I wanted to figure out the number of boys, I would do 27, which is my total number of students, minus 15, which is the number of girls, and I would get 12 of the students in the class are boys. So that means 12 out of 27 are boys. All right. So a ratio is part to part, boys to girls. A fraction is part to whole, girls out of the whole class. So in order to turn a ratio into a fraction, you have to add those two parts together, just like I did here. 15 plus 12 is 27, and that's going to be your denominator. Okay, now you can write fractions in words like I did here, 15 out of 27, or you can write them in fraction form, 15 over 27. The last vocab word that we need to review is a percent. And you should remember that a percent is a part to whole comparison as well. But the whole is always 100. So when we talk about a percent, we're talking about a part out of 100. So if I want to turn a fraction into a percent, which is what you're going to be doing today, you're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. That's going to give you a decimal. Then you're going to take that decimal and multiply it by 100 to get your percentage. So, for example, 15 divided by 27 is 0.556. If I multiply that by 100, I get 55.6% of the class is girls. Notice that I divided the part by the whole. All right, so I divided the number of girls by the total number of students in the class, which is 100% of the class. So 15 divided by 27 is 0.556. 55.6% of the class is girls. For boys, I would do 12 out of 27. So 12 divided by the entire class, 27, is 0.444. So 44.4% of the class is boys. So don't forget, divide the part by the whole to get the decimal, multiply the decimal by 100, and add your percent sign to turn a fraction into a percent. So that's what you're going to be practicing today. Today, you're going to be practicing ratios, fractions, and percents. I gave you this other visual here that can help you turn a decimal into a percent into a fraction, and a fraction into a decimal. All you have to do is follow the arrows. All right, so let's do a quick example here, just so that you have it. If I start with 1/3, all right, 1/3 is a fraction. So 1/3 is a fraction. If I want to turn that fraction into a decimal, well, look right here. To turn a fraction into a decimal, we're going to divide the part by the whole. All right, so let me put that here. Divide the part. See if I can get a division symbol here. Well, maybe not. Oh, there we go. All right, so we're going to do the part divided by the whole, okay, or the numerator divided by the denominator is another way that we can write that. So that's how we're going to turn a fraction into a decimal. So if I do that here, 1 divided by 3 is 0.33333, repeating. So I'm going to put that there for my decimal. Now we want to turn that into a percent. So all I have to do to turn that into a percent is multiply it by 100. So 0.33333 times 100 is 33 1/3%, or 33.33%. All right. So, and I know that because right here it says take the decimal times 100 to turn it into a percent. All right, let's try the next one. The next one, we're starting with a decimal, and they want us to turn it into a percent, and then they want us to turn it into a fraction. So I'm starting with a decimal right here. So I'm starting in this left corner, 0.5. To turn that into a percent, I'm just going to multiply it by 100. So 0.5 times 100 is 50%. So now I'm here at my percent, and I want to turn it into a fraction. To turn it into a fraction, I'm going to put the percent over 100. So I'm going to put 50 over 100. And then I can simplify 50 over 100 to 1/2. All right, so 50% is 1/2 as a fraction. We have one more. We're starting with the percent. So I'm starting here with the percent. To turn it into a fraction, I'm going to put it over 100. So 40 over 100. And I can simplify 40 over 100. I can divide by 20. And I would get 2/5 for my fraction. And then I'm up here now at fraction. To turn it into a decimal, I'm just going to divide 2 divided by 5 or 40 divided by 100, and I would get 0.4, and you can put the 0 there if you want. So this is what you're going to be doing first. You're going to use this little triangle to fill in the table for fraction, decimal, and percent. All right, so use that little triangle. That is a great little thing that you can always draw on a scrap piece of paper if you need to, or use it if you need to. One more OMG page that I have for you on slide 7. What if I need to turn a ratio into a fraction or a fraction into a ratio? It's really not that complicated. All you're going to do to turn a fraction into a ratio or a ratio into a fraction, all you need to remember is that one is part to part and one is part to whole. So for example, the first side here on the left, I'm trying to convert a ratio into a fraction. So I know my ratio has one part and a second part, part to part. In order to turn that into a fraction, I'm going to take one part plus the other part, and that's going to give me the whole. All right. Once I know the whole, then I can split the ratio into 2 fractions. So let me give you an example here. The ratio of boys to girls in a class is 5:3. So boys to girls means there are 5 boys for every 3 girls. So that's my ratio. I'm going to add those 2 parts together. 5 boys plus 3 girls. That's 8 total students that I'm talking about in the class. So that's my whole. Now I can write 2 fractions. What fraction of the class is boys? 5 out of 8 are boys because the ratio was 5:3, boys to girls. So 5 boys out of 8 total students, that's my fraction of boys. What is the fraction of girls in the class? Well, 3 out of the 8 were girls. So 3 out of 8 or 3/8 of the class is girls. So all you have to do if you are turning a ratio into a fraction is add your 2 parts together to get the whole, and then you can write the fraction from there. Now, what if I know the fraction, but I'm trying to turn it into a ratio? If you know the fraction and you're trying to turn it into a ratio, instead of adding to figure it out, you're going to subtract. So you're going to take your whole minus the part that you know, and you're going to subtract it to find the other part. So for example, 3/4 of the class has a cell phone. That is a fraction. That means 3 out of 4 kids have a cell phone. So how many kids don't have a cell phone? Well, 4, the whole, minus the 3 that have a cell phone is 1. So 3/4 of the class has a cell phone, but only 1/4 of the class has no cell phone. Does that make sense? So the ratio of cell phone to no cell phone would be 3:1. All right, because 3 kids have a cell phone, 1 kid doesn't have a cell phone. Altogether, we're talking about 4 kids. Now, remember, when I say we're talking about 4 kids, these ratios have been simplified down. So there might be more kids in the class, But for every 3 kids that have a cell phone, there's 1 kid who doesn't. I hope that makes sense, and that's what you're going to be practicing today on the other slides. You're going to start on slide 8 and 9 by filling in the missing information. So for the first 3, I gave you the percent. You're going to write the fraction, the decimal, and the ratio. The next 3 are fractions. You're going to turn them into a decimal, a percent, and a ratio. The next 3 are ratios, and then it kind of skips around after that. I'm going to go back and do a couple of examples with you in just a minute. After that, you have just a couple slides where you're going to be changing the comparison into a ratio, changing the comparison into a percent, and changing the comparison into a fraction. So the slides above, these 2 slides, 6 and 7, are your best friends today. If you need to go back and read those, go back and read them. And I want you to try your best. Obviously, you're doing this on your own. I wish I was there with you. This video is getting long already, so I don't want to talk forever, but do your best. And when you're in class tomorrow, we will do our best to catch you up and practice some more. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of these just so I can show you what you're going to do. For the first one, we already talked about 50%. We know that 50% is 50 out of 100, which is 1/2. We know that 50% as a decimal, 1 divided by 2 is 0.5 or 0.50. You can write it either way. They both mean the same thing. Now, the ratio. How can I write a ratio that represents 50%? Okay, so let's think about this for a minute. In order to turn a fraction into a ratio, we're going to take the whole and subtract the part. So I always like to think of something other than just thinking of a random naked fraction. So I like to think, okay, 1 out of 2 kids prefer summer to winter. So if 1 out of 2 kids prefer summer, then how many preferred winter? Well, another 1 out of 2 preferred winter. So the ratio of summer to winter would be 1 to 1. So that's my ratio, 1 to 1. And if we think about that, that makes sense, because if I add one part to the other part, 1 plus 1 is 2, I can say 1/2 of the kids liked summer, 1/2 of the kids liked winter. All right. The ratio is usually the toughest part for kids. So just do your best with it. I'm going to do one more for you, and then I'm going to let y'all go. All right. 3/5. If I divide 3 by 5, I get 0.6 or 0.60. Again, they mean the same thing. This is 60% because 0.6 times 100 is 60%. And now let's write this ratio. So I know my whole is 5. My part is 3. So 3 is going to be the first part of my ratio. And what's 5 minus 3? 5 minus 3 is 2. So 2 is the other part of my ratio. So 3/5, the ratio would be 3 to 2, because 3 kids like vanilla ice cream, 2 kids like chocolate ice cream, 5 kids all together. All right, I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry the video went a little bit long. Do your best today to fill in the rest of the slides. Again, use slides 6 and 7 to help you, and make sure this is done before you come in tomorrow, because if you don't do this today, tomorrow's just going to be twice as hard. So give it a try. Even if you get some wrong, that's how we learn. All right, I want you to really come in tomorrow at least trying some of this, so that tomorrow will go a little bit easier than today. All right, hope you guys have a great day. Message me as always. Don't forget about MobyMax, and if you have any missing work, add that to your list for today as well. I'll see y'all tomorrow.